Welcome to the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. Invisible Wheelchair Podcast is found on invisiblewheelchair.com, iTunes, and other podcast locations. It's our year in review for 2020. Each day this week, we are playing back the best of 2020 Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. Here is today's. Enjoy. Today I'm excited to introduce you to an inspiring person, Stephensmith. Stephensmith is the founder and CEO of NOCD, a company that provides online therapy for OCD. Under his leadership, NOCD has raised $5.8 million in a venture capital funding, grown the largest OCD treatment community in the world, reaching hundreds of thousands of people in over 95 countries, and has become the industry leader in providing exposure and response prevention, ERP, telehealth services. Prior to NOCD, Stephen was a former NCAA quarterback. Stephen personally suffers with OCD, so he created NOCD to help others with the condition get better and stay better more easily. Now, let's go to that interview. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for being part of the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. I welcome you and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me, Don. Really excited to chat with you today.
Well, Stephen, as I do with just about everybody I interview, I like to give a kind of a personal touch to it, give them a story about themselves that lets the audience connect with them. So would you be willing to share a story with us today?
Sure. I'd love to share a story. So my name's Stephensmith. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called NOCD, and we provide online therapy for obsessive compulsive disorder, a very severe, misunderstood, and prevalent mental health condition. And I actually founded the company based on my own personal experience. So I have OCD, specifically the intrusive thoughts and the mental compulsions. Some people refer to that type as quote unquote pure O, where you have a lot of mental actions that you do to make your OCD thoughts go away. And that's what I struggle with. And so I was a former college football player where I was basically living a life. I was the starting quarterback at my university, had great grades, great social life. After my sophomore year, I went home for summer vacation. I was training for my next season. I was working a little bit, just spending time with my family and friends. And all of a sudden, started having severe intrusive thoughts almost seemingly out of nowhere. And I was, not only perplexed by the thoughts, but also so disturbed by the thoughts that I wanted to do whatever I could to make them go away. So I started Google searching and I started to analyze the thoughts. And the goal was, could I try to find a logical answer to why I was having these thoughts so that way they would stop? Simple as that, because I just was disturbed. And so I would spend hours just Google searching. I would spend countless seconds throughout the day just thinking about the thought, trying to figure out why am I having it? What was the reason for it? What did I do? At the time, those thoughts were all relationship OCD based, right? So I started having the first manifestations of our OCD. They had some at times, disturbing, the sexual components to them as well. And that was frightening to me, to be frank. And that's why I think they were so, discomforting. And so ended up kind of spiraling out of control from there, where I had to stop training for football. I had to stop, seeing my friends. I just kind of stayed in my room trying to figure out what was going on until I realized, I should probably go find some help because this is very strange. I don't know what's going on. I'm under extreme anxiety all the time, it feels like. So I went to see a therapist, and it's just a therapist in network in my area, psychologist, and told him what was going on. And he said, oh, well, for every time you have a thought, I want you to take a rubber band and snap it across your wrist.
Okay. Interesting.
And so I started doing that, and of course started getting worse, right? So it was misdiagnosed. They just, you just have some anxiety. You should probably, take a rubber band and snap it across your wrist. So then, got worse. Next therapist I went to said, well, you probably should go move away from your family, because I think your family is causing you this stress. I think this is why all of a sudden you're under so much just, anxiety all the time. I think you should move away. So they said, pack up your bags and go back to Texas, where I was going to school at the time. So I literally was in Chicago, packed my bags and went to Texas, had no friends, no family. I went to see just friends from school. So I literally completely transformed my life in just 2 days. While I was in Texas, I was hoping that the thoughts would stop, but of course they didn't stop and got worse. And eventually became housebound, where I was misdiagnosed 3 more times. I had to stop going to school. I stopped playing football, and I was pretty much at rock bottom. At that time, I started developing depression. So I became suicidal. It was just in a horrid spot where the only thing I could pretty much do was, I'd have moments of clarity, because I would just do my compulsions that I learned after the fact, but I would have moments of clarity, and I would, in those times, just feed off of them. And all of a sudden I start obsessing again and get right back to where I used to be. And so that cycle really caused me a significant amount of depression. Also, the depression occurred because I lost pretty much everything that I was working hard towards. I had stopped going to school. I stopped playing football. I just had a complete, free fall in terms of my life in a span of just 6 months. At that point, I was like, okay, well, I don't really know what's going on. So I'm going to try to search Google. I've been searching Google a lot to try to figure it out, right? Not figuring out the thoughts in particular like I used to do, but more just figuring out what's going on. I started searching my symptoms, and I saw other people out there going through the exact same thing as me. And at this time, the thoughts morphed into HOCD. So I first had the ROCD, then it morphed into the HOCD. People were there, explaining that what they were going through was OCD, and they were finding their symptoms or triggers, what the feelings, just were like, in their chest, right? All of that stuff. And I was like, that's exactly what I'm going through. I had no idea it had a name. My next step was, can I go and find help? Where can I go and do that? So I started searching OCD treatment, and I stumbled upon exposure and response prevention, the gold standard treatment. They said that you have to go and see a specialist, a licensed therapist that specializes in ERP and in OCD to get better. So searched for a specialist in my area, and there was one. She had a 7-month wait list, and she charged $300 out of pocket per session.
Wow.
And that was the clinician who ended up helping me get better, but it was extremely challenging just to get to that clinician. Fortunately, a family friend covered the cost of my care. I got off the wait list, saw that therapist, and I saw her for 1 hour a week. And she diagnosed me with OCD and started me up with an ERP treatment plan. Taught me how to respond to these thoughts, not by analyzing them, not by trying to disprove them, but by trying to accept them. And that was a really important point in my treatment journey. And although I saw this therapist once a week, I'd spend most of the time still by myself. So I still struggled quite a bit through treatment, because I had to go home after I saw this therapist and basically be my own therapist, but I had no support. I was not in the state to really do that. Slowly and surely, I got better. I kind of got back on my feet, went back to school. And the reason why, again, got better is ERP is very, very effective at treating OCD, even those that have the quote unquote pure O, right, or the mental compulsions. And the reason why is ERP teaches you how to respond to these, intrusive thought, images, and urges, right? That's the best part about it. It's the response prevention that is key. It's learning how to accept uncertainty, and that's what drives you forward. So anyways, I got better, went back to school, finished up my degree, finished up my football career at Pomona College in Southern California. And reflecting back, and I'm like, OCD is very manageable. It's very difficult to get treated because it's hard to find an effective treatment due to all the barriers. It's difficult to get diagnosed, but once you get to treatment, it's actually a very manageable condition. So it's not a clinical issue. It's more of an operational issue. If there's a way to solve that operational issue, then you could really solve this problem. With that kind of vision, I was like, well, what if you use technology to do that? What if you had a platform where people can do live, face-to-face telehealth sessions with a licensed therapist that specializes in OCD and ERP, and then between sessions when that therapist isn't around, you had access to support that can help you do response prevention by yourself and also get that support that you need to keep going, right? It's because, OCD is very isolating. And kind of with that vision, created an OCD. And today we're one of the largest OCD treatment communities in the world, if not the largest. Hundreds of thousands of people engage with us in some capacity, whether it's inside our app, our content, or in our therapy service. And we also have one of the fastest growing network of OCD therapists in the world. They're all licensed therapists, licensed psychologists, licensed counselors, licensed social workers, and they all have specialty training in exposure and response prevention, and we deliver the specialty training. So our clinical leadership team, comprised of Dr. Jamie Fiesner, our chief medical officer, and Dr. Patrick McGrath, our head of clinical services, both who are on the scientific advisory board for the International OCD Foundation. They've actually together with some other people on our team have developed this custom training. So our therapists all go through the training, and then after the training, they are supervised by our clinical leadership team to ensure that people with OCD getting treated by us are getting the best treatment possible and get an opportunity to not only get better, but once they're better, to get an opportunity to stay better, because OCD is chronic. So we've built this out. Our goal is to use technology to help kind of fill in the gaps, so help more people with OCD get the right care that they need. And because, again, it's not a treatment that is, OCD is extremely manageable. And once you manage it, you can stay better. It's just a matter of getting access to this treatment. So access is really driven by technology, and we've learned that. So very excited to be on this podcast. Appreciative of, again, you having me here, Don.
Sure. I love your story, because I live it with two kids of my own that have gone through, are going through and gone through the OCD side of the world. And it does. It like you said, it sounds to me, it took over your life, which it did for us too. I can connect with it in that manner. You've got to the point, you've introduced to us to the fact that you started in, I call it NOCD, but you say NOCD. So that's, I have to remember that. I might even re-record the bio to meet that. So,
well, let me explain why it's called NOCD, and I think this is really important. And people call it NOCD, they call it no OCD, but it's actually NOCD. And here's why the name of the company is NOCD. So, to the point I made before, OCD is a condition driven by obsessions and compulsions, but the goal is to really stop doing the compulsions, right? Everybody has intrusive thoughts, images, and urges from time to time. The difference between someone with OCD and someone without it is someone without OCD lets those thoughts kind of pass throughout their head day to day. They know there's not much meaning behind them. Someone with OCD gets so disturbed by those thoughts, images, and urges that they do these actions called compulsions to try to make them stop. Those actions end up drawing the illness or pushing the illness forward, right? And so our goal is, can you stop doing the compulsions? So at the end of the day, like our team was asking ourselves, well, why is it called OCD? Why is it not just called the compulsion disorder if the compulsions make the condition worse? So the name of the company is a play on the word OCD, right? It's basically saying, say no to the compulsion disorder, right? Stop those compulsions. And our goal as a company is to help people stop doing their compulsions and help them accept uncertainty, right? That's the goal of what we're trying to do. That's the reason why the company is called NOCD.
That's wonderful. And I'm glad you explained it, because I'm going through a course right now on ERP. She talks about that. She says, we're not here to get rid of the thought, because everybody has thoughts. You get them all the time. It's learning how to manage those thoughts. So I'm glad you explained that, because I think it's very important. I can kind of understand this, but I'm going to ask you anyway, where did it come into wanting to be an advocate for it?
It's a great question. I think for me, at least, at first it was a personal challenge, right? That I went through, and I was like, I hope no one else goes through this. Then as things progressed, as NOCD started to grow, as we started to understand kind of the ins and outs of why this problem occurred, it became more of an ethical issue, right? And we know that this problem exists primarily because we haven't been able to properly identify people with OCD in the healthcare system. That to me was a huge challenge, because if the OCD has 1 in 40 lifetime prevalence, yet like just only several thousands of people surface today with the condition to these big healthcare companies, how is that possible? How can, especially given how disabling OCD really is, it's top 10 most disabling disorder. When people with OCD go untreated, they're 10 times more likely to die by suicide. I mean, there's data out there today that is showing how severe of an issue this is, how costly of an issue this is, but yet nobody's identified, or no one's prioritized the identification of it. So it started off as a personal issue, and then it transformed into an ethical issue. It's like, well, can we fix that, right? Can we fix the way the world sees OCD, and not do it through a grassroots awareness movement, but do it through a way where we kind of surface the havoc that OCD causes in the healthcare system, right? And that havoc isn't getting attributed back to OCD. It's getting attributed to the results of untreated OCD, the substance use disorders from time to time. It's getting attributed to the ER visits that are caused when people are suicidal. It's getting attributed to the medical conditions people develop from living an unhealthy life over, for decades, right? Mm-hmm. And the family members' medical issues are getting attributed not to the challenges they're dealing with for their children dealing with OCD, but getting attributed to maybe high blood pressure, right? It's just this, there's an attribution issue that's preventing OCD from really getting identified and prioritized. And so that ethical issue has really driven me forward to advocate more. And a lot of my advocacy goes kind of behind the scenes. It goes to health. I advocate quite frequently to different healthcare companies. I start talking about this problem. I start talking about why OCD is so challenging, right? Why it's not, so challenging for so many people. So it's not as much patient-facing advocacy. It's more business-facing advocacy, because I think that's where we're really going to move the needle in the next 10 years, right? I think we're going to move the needle by these big organizations seeing how challenging OCD is and seeing the cost of OCD on their organization. And I think that's when we're going to start to see progress and see them get other big, essentially players to come in and to really try to transform the way people with OCD live. And that's how I advocate.
Could you explain how like if somebody's going to go on your program, how does it work? Can you take us through the steps of what they do with your program?
Sure. So the NOCD platform is a free download. So people can either download our app or they can start by going to our website. Step one is to book a free 15-minute phone call with we call them our care team, but they're essentially an intake team. And we will talk to you about kind of how our therapy works, what to expect, what not to expect. We can help you get scheduled with one of our therapists on that phone call. And then from there, what happens is we'll match you with one of our therapists. You'll get scheduled for your first session. It's a 90-minute diagnostic assessment, so that that's the first part. We just want to understand what you're going through and what subtypes you have, what other conditions you might have, et cetera. Once you're scheduled, then you can not only do the live face-to-face telehealth sessions with that therapist as a scheduled time, you can also message that therapist between sessions, and they'll respond at least once per day, 5 days a week. And then you'll also have access to all the NOCD platform's functionality. So we have a peer community and different self-help tools that can help you, kind of stick to your treatment between sessions and also get that support that you need no matter what time of day it is. So we built this model where you can do live face-to-face sessions with your therapist. You can get that specialist that you need to get better. You can also get support between sessions to make sure you're never alone. And then once you're better, you can stay better by using the NOCD platform as support. So it's as a tool to help you with active maintenance, right? And that's our overall goal. So step one is to either download our platform NOCD on the App Store or Google Play Store, or check out our website. Step two is to book a free 15-minute phone call with our team to learn more and to get scheduled. And then once you're scheduled, step three is then to start the program with our therapist, right? And you can do that virtually, and it's all telehealth.
Now, I'm going to ask a piece off of that is, I know myself that OCD, any disorder like this, affects the whole family. Mm-hmm. It's something that disrupts the family, shuts it down, all of that. Is there anything within your program that you do that goes beyond just the person and goes into the family to help them in any way?
Yes. So we create quite a bit of content. So we will create videos. We'll have webinars we'll run. We'll have different blog articles we'll write. So we do a variety of different things to help the family. And we know education is oftentimes the most important thing, right? So making sure family members understand what their loved one's going through. That's really important, because if they're empowered and educated, then they're going to know, for example, not to give reassurance. Yeah. Or they'll know what if they see their family member having a blank look on their face, they'll know probably they're in their head, right? Trying to just trying to survive whatever's happening, right? That education is critical. So we've gone above and beyond to help ensure that our members are educated and also their families are educated.
All right, that's great. That's great, because like I said, to me that's a very powerful part of it is the family understanding, because what I run into a lot in the work I do is one member of one partner in the marriage will say, oh, they're just, they're this, or they don't really believe it, and the other one believes it, and then so there's this bit of a rub there with getting good treatment, getting it done well. So because it takes a family support to really make it happen too, I think. Right, exactly. Being where you are now, what kind of advice would you give to somebody, maybe a parent going through that doesn't know what to do? I know coming to your company would be one part of the advice, but is there anything else that you would tell them and or the person that is actually going through it?
Sure. So to tell a parent, or let's start with the parent. The first thing I tell a parent is, look, this is a very manageable condition if you go to the right form of treatment, right? It's like there's oftentimes therapists all over that say, hey, I can treat OCD well, and they actually won't be able to treat OCD well. So it's really important you find if a licensed therapist with specialty training in both OCD and exposure and response prevention. That's the key, because if you find somebody who doesn't specialize in ERP or, and they just say, I do generic CBT for OCD, that's not really what you want. And that's going to probably make your loved one worse over time. It's critical you go and you find an OCD specialist therapist that does exposure response prevention, and then you interview the therapist to make sure that they in fact do ERP very well. You have the right to interview your therapist and make sure that that therapist knows exactly what they're doing. So that's the first piece of advice. If you're a person with OCD, the thing I'd say is have hope. OCD took me to rock bottom. I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like to wake up every morning knowing that in 5 minutes you're going to have a really bad OCD episode, and it's going to feel like terrible. It's going to feel terrible for the rest of the day. You're going to be obsessing in your mind from 7:30 a.m. till 10:30 p.m. and it's going to be torture. I know what that feels like, right? I also know what it feels like to be able to manage OCD, to conquer OCD, and to have peace in your life again, right? It's like a really incredible thing. And if once you learn how to manage OCD, once you get better and once you stay better, right, you're going to be able to accomplish more than you'll be able to accomplish more than you thought was possible. You're going to go to new levels that you didn't even realize you could get to, right? And I've seen that personally with just how much OCD has grown. But without it going through OCD, I probably wouldn't know how to overcome significant challenges. Like any challenge going forward, once you manage OCD, it feels kind of insignificant. And it's a really powerful feeling. So I'll tell you, it's to have a lot of hope, because one, OCD is very manageable. It's just about getting to the right treatment. And two, once you manage it, you unlock new levels of potential you didn't even think were possible, right? So that's the advice I give someone with OCD.
Yeah, it's almost it's almost like there is a positive side to OCD in a way, that it does build up character and stamina and courage, because I know what my daughter went through and where she's come,
right.
How much she's, I think, stronger because of it in a way. And I think
Definitely.
you're right with that. So
definitely.
Well, Stephen, just is there anything else that you'd like to add in as far as about NOCD or yourself that you'd like to add in right now?
John, I think we covered it. I'm really appreciative to be here on this podcast. I think in general, again, OCD is a condition that can be managed and conquered, right? Even though it's chronic, even though you're always going to have it, you could live a very, very happy life with it, where you're not under extreme distress 24/7. If that's where you are today, just know that distress may not always be there. You may always have the thoughts, but you may not always have the distress. And the thoughts over time, may not bother you, right? And when they stop bothering you, what happens? They don't happen as frequently because you don't care about them as much. And then when they don't happen as frequently, your thoughts are the thoughts that are happening in your head are really life related most of the time. So it's like it's a really incredible phenomenon that happens once you manage OCD. And I just want to let everybody know who's listening, who's struggling with this, like, you could definitely manage it too. So it's really important to understand that.
So just if you want to take a moment here and let them know the best way to find out more, where would they go? What would they do?
Sure. So you could do one of two things. You can either go to our website, www.nocd.com, and that's spelled NOCD. Or you can download the NOCD app, either through the App Store or the Google Play Store. I'd highly recommend you book a free 15-minute call with our intake team just to learn more about our therapy service. The reason is our team has deep expertise in treating OCD. So our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Jamie Fiesner, and our Head of Clinical Services, Dr. Patrick McGrath, have a combined total of 40 plus years treating OCD. And they've run all types of different inpatient, intensive outpatient, partial hospitalization programs, outpatient clinics. We really know this well. And our goal is simply to help you get better and then stay better. I keep saying that because I think it's so important to think about it, because when you manage OCD, you get better, but then you're actively managing it afterwards to help yourself stay better and live your life. And it's definitely possible.
Well, and I think it's important to say it over and over, because when you're in the midst of it, when you're sitting in it, and even if you're watching this and you're sitting in it, it's hard to know those things are true. It's hard to. So it's good that that's the whole reason I do the podcast. That's the reason why I do what I do, is to be able to get people to understand that there's treatment and there's a way out. So, Stephen, it has been a joy to talk to you, and I really, really appreciate you being part of this today.
Yeah, thank you. And likewise, I really appreciate having me on.
Well, that was another podcast from the Invisible Wheelchair podcast of the past year, 2020. Remember, we are here to help you get out of your anxiety and OCD. For a free consult, simply visit either familyocd.com or focusedhealthyfamily.com, where we will work with individuals and families to live a more joyous and free life. We also invite you to give your comments to these podcasts, or to be on the podcast telling your story. Simply go to theinvisiblewheelchair.com and you will find a place to tell your story or a place to leave comments. We look forward to both your comments and your stories. So, thank you for being part of this, and have a great day.